Hi there, how's it going? Now, we had a couple of requests in on the member channel for improvised weapons work, so that's what we've been focusing on for the last couple of uploads. In fact, we're going to do a whole series on various types of improvised weapons, and of course, if you want to get access to that and all our other instructional content, just click the join button below for details. Now, in doing this, we got back to doing some work with the chain. This is something I've been exposed to before, of course. I think the first time was on my second trip to Toronto. I remember it as being quite a painful experience. I came out with marks and bruises all around my ribs and everything else. So there was that, and we've kind of dipped into using the chain now and again. But in terms of improvised weapons, it's not really something we've looked at a lot. And we were chatting about this, and we think the reason for this is, to be honest, in the things I've experienced, I've never really seen a chain particularly used. One of the lads spoke about bike chains. He remembers bike chains being used, which is a thing. In my experience, improvised weapons tended to be things like bats or Stanley knives, and a lot of the time people would just use a bottle or a glass. I guess this was in pubs and clubs, you know, they just reach out and pick up something that was close to hand and use that. Having said that, we dug the chain out, and what I found is, this time, paying a little bit more attention to it perhaps, that the chain is an excellent tool for refining our movement. If we look at solo training first, now the stick is a great bit of kit for solo training. It's something I use every day. There's so many things you can do on your own with the stick. You can develop so many different attributes. The advantage the chain has over the stick is it's a lot less predictable. So once you get the feel of the stick, it's quite easy to roll it up your arm, for example, then bring it round the back and manipulate it and circle it and everything else, because of course it's fixed. What you find with the chain straight away is you can do a lot of the same movements. For example, if I just start rolling the chain up and down the arm, now I'm supporting it at this end, so that's relatively easy. As soon as I take this support away, now you can see it starts becoming a little more challenging, because it's not sort of evenly balanced, if you like. It's very difficult to find the balance point of the chain. So that's how we've started our solo work with the chain. You get some familiarity with it, you start just moving it around from hand to hand, then you start working with one hand. Now you can get into quite involved routines with this, and of course you can pick up speed and momentum as you go along. I mentioned partner training as well, of course, and one of the main things we do that is learning to absorb the force of the chain. I'll explain more on that in a moment, but you can start to prepare yourself solo for that simply by doing this kind of work. So now I'm bringing the chain across to the arm, and much like we do with the stick, I mean it's the same movement really, I work to absorb. So again, if I'm working solo or with a partner, I have to put a certain amount of oomph into the movement. In fact, what we found is sometimes the stronger the hit, the better the person reacts, because there's that extra level of fear comes into the body. And if you can use that fear to help you move, it will actually sharpen up your movement. But to prepare on a solo level, you can just start like this. I absorb and I sort of throw the chain back. Now, of course, I can do this all around the body, the arms, the legs, I can work into the body as well. But that's a very easy way to get you into the next stage, which is training with a partner. So now you start hitting each other, of course, and I'd advise that first of all you have the person stand with the arms out, and then they can bring the arms down to the side. And on each time you're bringing the chain at 90 degrees to the arms. So as you can see here, if the arms are out to the side, the chain comes over the top or underneath, and the person rotates their arm to absorb the impact. Again, with this kind of work, you need to swing the chain, it needs to have some momentum behind it, and of course you work the arms and you work the legs. You can get into disarming work from here and all that sort of stuff, which is something, of course, we go into from the perspective of improvised weapons. But what I want to talk about today is something else, something very useful we discovered when working the chain to the body. So you'll notice here, hopefully, if I swing the chain across, and I've got to try and do this slowly to show it, my arm contacts the chain and I move to absorb that energy or that impact, and hopefully that decelerates the chain to such an extent that it's no longer a risk, and from there I can bounce it back. Now with the shorter chain, that's not such an issue working on the arm. If I place my arm further up the chain here, you see how that whips around. Now we can use that in terms of our disarm stuff, because I can use that to wrap and then grab the chain. However, when we come to the body, this presents something more of a problem, because I can hit and absorb here, but that end is now whipping round into my back, and it actually accelerates because I decelerate the chain here. See, here's the normal chain. Watch now what happens to the tip when I decelerate in the middle. You see, it actually accelerates. So what we found when working to the body was everyone was able to absorb that hit fine, that first contact, but then the chain whips round, boom, and that second contact, that really does sting. And that's where you start getting all your little marks and bruises over the body. And this for me highlighted a very important fact that I'd not really thought about before. Sometimes it takes me a while to catch on, right? Because what happens is, I think, psychologically, we see the chain coming in, there's a certain amount of fear comes into the body or into the mind, but because we are able to absorb that first hit, the fear goes away. Yeah, I've dealt with that, there's no more danger. But, of course, then that tip accelerates round and we get hit. So what this teaches us is basically to keep moving. Keep moving. And I know it's one of those things that we hear all the time. It's one of the 4 pillars, right? Movement. Why would you stop? Well, I think what happens is we stop because we think we're safe in that split second, but then something else happens. Now, this is a very important lesson to learn if we're talking about self-defense or combat, or even just a potentially dangerous situation of any type. Because we really should not stop moving until we're very sure that the whole situation is resolved. Because what can happen is, let's take something very simple. Someone's going to come in and punch me, so I sort of cover and the punch misses. So, oh, I'm okay now. Well, aside from anything else, if I see that punch even developing before it comes in, I shall already be moving, and I shall continue moving until the threat is neutralised. I should always take my work to a conclusion. That was the phrase that Vladimir and Mikhail always used. Always take your work to a conclusion. Now, in some types of training, we don't do that. If, for example, we're working sparring, generally we're looking to lengthen the process. But for actual use and in testing, in scenario work, that sort of thing, pressure testing, we want to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. I do feel sometimes in martial arts we can get a little bit programmed into waiting for the attack. We both set up here and here. My partner launches the attack, I do this or I defend in some way, and then it's my turn to attack. You get this back and forth like a tennis match. Now again, in some types of sparring that can be useful, or what we call play fighting or slow work or fast work, whatever it is, we're looking for this exchange. But the reality is, if someone's attacking me, then even before that attack starts, as I see it developing, I'm moving in and I'm working continuously until, you know, everything is resolved. So for me, this kind of work with the chain is excellent for that, because we're building that response in without really thinking about it. And again, this is one of the beauties of Systema. It, to me, plugs directly into the nervous system rather than the conscious mind where I'm thinking right foot steps back, left hand comes up, right hand punches out. It bypasses all of that thinking level and comes straight into the nervous system. So if I pick something up with my nervous system, I'm already responding to it, not reacting. If you took a quote normal person, right, and hit them even on the arm, even if you did this, they're probably going to tense against it. That's a reaction. That's like a fear reaction. I tense, and then even that, I can feel that it hurts. The response is to move with the force, and so on and so on. Now, you can get into arguments about whether this is a natural response or if it's a learned response and all that sort of thing. That's an interesting debate for another day. Whatever the answer is to that, the fact is that this sort of training feeds directly into your nervous system. You're training your nervous system. That way, if and when something should happen, you're not really reacting with fear, with the flinch response. You're not really reacting with the brain in that kind of step 1, step 2, step 3 way, but your body should be very naturally working. Your nervous system gets what we call spiked, it's switched on, and it starts to work. So my advice would be, if you really want to sharpen up the body, if you really want to wake your body up, get yourself a chain. If you want some ideas on how to use that, and lots of other things as well, as I said, do click the join button below for details on accessing our member channel. And of course, there's a ton of other ways you can do this work as well. The knife is very good. Perhaps that's something we'll look at next time. The issue is, for most of us, we lead very comfortable lives. You know, we've got our heads in the screen for a lot of the time, and all this kind of stuff, which is great. You know, no one wants to have to struggle too much in life. I don't believe in glorifying poverty and all that kind of thing. Having said that, it does mean that we can lose our edge somewhat. You know, our nervous system gets a little bit dulled, and then when something does happen, we tend to go into that reaction. If we've been doing our Systema well, we've been training well, then the body is a little bit more aware and awake. And of course, lots of other things will follow on from that. So, short story is, stick is great, but also, if you haven't got one already, get yourself a chain. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. As always, if you've got any constructive comments, please put them down below. Please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.